Um, I've written for different newspapers on a regional basis, but I've always wanted to write a book, and finally got around to it about 5 years ago. There's a sheet about the book on your table. Talks about this, but about 5 years ago, Ammer and UE had two long power outages, one a week each. One was in the summer and one was in the winter, so I got to feel like a caveman twice in 1 year. And it got to me to thinking about what would it be like if that happened widespread and there was no knowing if it was coming back. And you know, there have been movies about that kind of thing. There's a TV show about that kind of thing. But most of the time when you see a TV or a news or a movie about that kind of subject, they focus on what would the president do, or what would Will Smith do, or what would Harrison Ford do, or whatever. What I wanted to write in my book was what would normal people do? The owner of the local grocery store, the guy next door who's got a basement full of guns, etc. You know, what would people do under those circumstances when you didn't really know what was going to happen? So the story is set in almost Illinois, which is thinly disguised Alton, and I'd like to do a brief reading from it from chapter 1 for you. DeMarcus Johnson had just tossed a Mother's Day card onto the old rubber conveyor belt. Buck Schneider was bagging Mrs. Sandusky's groceries. He planned to deliver them and then snag a late lunch. Then something thumped in the sky. It was low and ponderous boom that rattled the windows and walls as well as its internal organs. In this neighborhood, Buck was accustomed to windows rattling due to heavy bass notes as young gangstas cruised by, but this was different. It was a single thump that carried great authority. There was a burst of light outside, then a tingling sensation that bordered on pain washed over his entire body. Over in an instant, it kept him feeling drained and spacey. His left hand went limp, and the large jar of dill pickles he'd been holding fell to the floor with a crash. Buck turned toward the cash register where his brother, Bud, was working. A moment before, Bud's fingers had been flashing across the keys with amazing speed. The Schneider brothers had resisted adding technology to their neighborhood grocery store. They still used adhesive stickers with the price tags right on the grocery items and never bought the scanning equipment necessary to read barcodes. They simply had not seen a need to change the way they had been running the store for over 15 years, which was essentially the same way their father had run things for decades before that. When Buck glanced at Bud, he saw that his brother was standing still as a statue. The fingers of Bud's right hand were still poised above the cash register keys, and his hand was quivering slightly. Bud's frozen face twitched, and his eyes looked concerned and confused. That was because the pacemaker in his chest had stopped working, which left his heart unmotivated to keep beating. An instant later, Bud joined 27 dill pickles on the linoleum floor of Schneider Brothers' corner grocery store. Buck realized that his own mouth was hanging open and convinced his jaw to close it. He noticed that the lights had gone out and the steady hum of freezers and fluorescent lights were gone, no longer the background music of his day. The eerie silence was broken only by the faint sounds of birds chirping outside the store. Pooty wheat, they seemed to say. After a few seconds, Buck moved toward his brother's fallen body. Before he even touched Bud, he knew he was dead. Buck sensed correctly that it was the kind of death that no amount of chest thumping would reverse. And so it goes. Listen, back in the days of Jimi Hendrix and blacklight posters, there was a great American author who often wrote, "And so it goes," whenever someone in the story he was telling died. It still seems like the thing to say in my book. And over the next few minutes, the characters in the grocery store discover that there is nothing that works, nothing that uses electricity, nothing that uses batteries, so cars are gone, cell phones are dead, pacemakers have gone out, basically no generator works, there's nothing that uses electric power is working. And then we pick up with another character. Ellie Pence had worn her hair long all the 61 years of her life. It was steel gray and hung about halfway down her back. She generally wore khaki and pale green clothes that looked like an army uniform, though she considered herself a complete pacifist. She was short and wiry and physically fit. She consumed mass quantities of granola, roughage, and herbal supplements every day. Ellie drank fair trade coffee and cared much more for the environment than she did for human beings. Ellie had recently retired after 35 years of being a pain in the butt at a local insurance company. As the company gradually slouched its way toward oblivion, Ellie had managed to survive 8 different layoffs because she was a highly productive worker. Her productivity was powerful enough to offset the fact that she was a pain in the butt. 179 people who were nicer than Ellie lost their insurance jobs, but Ellie made it all the way to an early retirement. One Black Friday, her best friend Cheryl had come to Ellie's desk and took a Kleenex from the khaki-colored box. Cheryl selected Ellie as her best friend because she had masochistic tendencies. 35 people got laid off today, Cheryl said tearfully. I could care less, Ellie replied. Actually, she meant that she couldn't care less, which was true. She just said it wrong. She knew she said it wrong, but she didn't care about that either. On the day the sky thumped, Ellie was working in the garden on a mostly futile attempt to grow a number of items she hoped to eat. Most of what would actually grow there would be eaten by animals and bugs, except for the squash. Ellie always had more squash than she knew what to do with. The neighborhood animals and bugs were all grateful to Ellie for most of the food in her fine garden, but they could care less for her squash. When the sky thumped, Ellie lifted her eyes and saw a big puff of dark smoke that had sparks flying around in it. The sound the sky made was a deep bass poot that rattled everything around her, including her tomato cages. Then Ellie felt a tingling that felt like little knives digging into her bones. It only lasted an instant, and then the world was completely silent except for the birds, who seemed rather unimpressed by the thump in the sky. Humph, Ellie said, and wondered what had just happened. She heard a high-pitched whistling sound and looked up to see a jet heading toward the airport. Jets flew over her house on a daily basis, so this in itself was not unusual. Ellie noticed, however, as the jet disappeared over the trees, that it seemed to be moving too quickly and at an odd angle. She stood in her garden, her fingers absently holding her garden weasel as she stared at the horizon, pondering the odd things happening in the sky. After a moment, she was aware of the birds singing merrily, and she heard a rumble or two of thunder in the distance. She glanced at her watch. It was 2:17. Better get back to work, Ellie shrugged to herself. Her eyes surveyed her little garden, noting that the squash was looking good again this year. Snyder Brothers Corner Grocery Store and Ellie's garden were both located in the town of Almost. Almost was not the town's real name, but it almost is. I like to call it Almost because it's a small town that was almost important on a number of occasions, hence the name. Almost was almost the state capital. It was almost a railroad hub. It was almost an important port on the Mississippi River. In the 21st century, it was a Rust Belt town where you could almost make a living. Almost constantly tried to be an important town, but just couldn't get itself motivated, much like Bud Schneider's heart without its pacemaker. There was a circle of grass in the center of town that was lassoed by a street. The circle of grass is where the state capitol was almost built 150 years ago. There was a fountain in the middle of the circle of grass that squirted water high in the air. At night, a bunch of spotlights would make the water change colors. On hot summer nights in the 1960s, Buck and Bud Snyder would beg their dad to orbit the fountain in their car so they could watch the fountain put on its light show. Their car did not have seat belts, and they hung halfway out the windows as they drove around the fountain. One night, a lightning bug smacked Bud in the teeth, and when he laughed, he swallowed it. The next day, Bud and Buck hovered over the toilet to see if ingesting the lightning bug would make Bud's poop glow. Tragically, the boys were unable to detect anything different in Bud's poop, even with the lights off. This was a great disappointment to all the kids in the neighborhood except for Ellie Pence. When she heard the news, she tossed her reddish-brown hair over her left shoulder and sniffed, "I could care less." At 2:17 in the afternoon, the day the sky thumped, the fountain in the circle of grass in the heart of Almost quit working. The fountain was dead, perhaps never to squirt water into the air again. And so it goes. That's selected portions of chapter 1. Thank you. I've got 21 reviews on Amazon so far. 19 of those reviews are 5 stars. That's as high a rating as it gets. The county clerk, Kurt Prenzler, is crazy about the book. He says it's a masterpiece. He thinks it's wonderful what it does, how it takes in the area and makes it come alive. And he's invited me to come speak before the county board in an upcoming meeting because he wants them to help promote it. I don't know what they can do, but I'm going. But I've gotten great word of mouth from it. So anyway, I'll welcome to ask any questions you have about the writing process or about the book. The title, Vonnegut'S Ghost, 3 ghosts appear during the course of the book. It's not ghosts as in haunting, scary haunting. It's kind of ghosts like in a Christmas Carol sort of thing. But the 3 ghosts are famous people, and they have things to say about what's going on. They're commenting on the situation in the country at the time. And one of those ghosts is Kurt Vonnegut, who was the famous author from the 60s and on. And that's who the book is named after. And the book is written somewhat in his style. So anyway, it's been a lot of fun being an author, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How long did it take to write it?
I wrote the first draft in a year. I thought it was perfect. I gave it to 7 friends with highlighters and pens and told them to mark it up. Rewriting and getting it ready for publish took another 9 months. But it was really, one of my friends used to be a professional editor, and I owe him a great debt. He was very helpful and helped bring it to a good point with me. So anyway, I'm all told about 2 years to bring it to press. Yeah.
Do you use a publishing house or self-publish?
It's published through Amazon. They have a self-publishing wing that you can do it through. Very neat situation. The beauty of the thing is that I don't have to have 10,000 of these in my garage like you used to have to if you were self-publishing. If you went on Amazon today and ordered the book on Amazon, they would print one book and ship it out to you, and it would look just like this. I mean, they have the technology now that they can print as ordered. And then there are also kiosks like that coming to large bookstores also, where you're going to be able to walk into a bookstore before too long and say, I notice you don't have this book, I'd like to have it. They can push a button and print it for you in the store, and it'll look just like a regular book. That's coming soon too, so, yes.
When you write a book, and I was always curious about this, you don't write it just from the start to the end, do you? Do you go back and change a character because you thought of something else, or how does that process work?
Well, for me, I read a book called On Writing by Stephen King. It's a book, he talks about how he writes. And he said what he likes to do is put his characters in situations and then see what they will do, which I thought was a great idea, because I used to write and draw my own comic books when I was a kid, and that's what I would do. I'd take Batman or the Flash and put them in a situation, and then I'd try to figure out what they would do. I wrote the first 3 chapters, and then I thought of what the ending was going to be, so I wrote the last 2 chapters, and then I bridged it. What I did was I just saw what the characters did to end up at the end. It was a lot of fun.
I take it this is all on computer, is how you do it, or?
I did it on computer, yeah.
Do you type it in, or do you talk it in, or how do you?
I typed it in. Took good old typing class at Alton High, still typed 55, 60 words a minute. But I did go back and rewrite it more than I thought I would. I thought it coming out, like I said the first time, and I thought it was more complete. But it was a very, very interesting process, and I'm looking forward to doing it. A lot of people who have read it are begging me to do a sequel. It is complete in itself. It doesn't require a sequel, but I may do one. I'm thinking about it. Working on getting this one sold first.
Who's going to play the parts in the movie?
I don't know, but I sent a copy to Brian Jund, who's an area filmmaker. He's from this area. I sent him a copy, hoping, I said, hey, you need to make a movie out of this. I went to school with your mom, I told him, you know. And I did. I went to school with her for 10 years and said, you know, you need to read this, you know. I haven't heard from him, but, you know, the challenge is now it's doing pretty well in the Alton area. It is for sale at Godfrey Bookstore, but they're going out of business. Not because of my book. Second reading downtown, and of course you can get it on Amazon. I'm working on getting it at a store in the mall, but haven't had any luck yet. The chain stores have more difficulty placing things than a local store. Yeah.
Is there like a local authors guild? I know there's other authors that we've had here and stuff. Is there like a?
Not that I know of. There might be. I have teamed up with a couple other authors to do signings and that sort of thing, and that's been fun. There's an author who's about 10 steps ahead of me in the process of promoting his book, and he lives up in Hillsboro. And I went and had lunch with him for a couple hours last week. His book is now being considered for the Oprah Winfrey Book Club. If he hits that, I mean, he's hit the jackpot. But he sold, I know, 20,000 copies of his book. So, but he's 62, retired and divorced and focused. I'm not that focused, but I mean, I hope to do well. But I'm trying to learn from him as much as I can.
How much?
$15 for a book. If you'd like to buy 3, like if you wanted to give one as a gift, they're $35 for 3, and I'd be happy to sign them. And I have plenty. Yeah, always have plenty. If you ever see me out and about, I always have books. But if you'd like to buy one, that'd be great. I talked to Charles Hubner about speaking at Jerseyville Rotary, so put in a good word for me.
I know, I've got your stuff.
And Tyler's working on Wood River for me, so I'm making the Rotary. I'm doing the Rotary tour right now.
This presentation,